on now. Oh, it worked. Yay. Hey there. So I apologize, but nothing was working. And I was going to end up doing things from my phone, but I don't have to do that. So that's cool. I actually went and got the physical book off my bookshelf to just read it through my phone. So, hey there. Probably Jason now. That's why they don't comment. All right, so quick reminder as to where we are. I posted the video where I read this introduction. I'm calling it a 4th of July special, tongue in cheek, obviously. I hope that's obvious. It's my sense of humor. I'm going to read a couple of excerpts, and my dresser is getting on my nerves because my linen is tucked in the drawer. It's bothering me. I'm going to read to you from, it's called Sinister Forces, A Grimoire of American Political Witchcraft, Book 1, The Nine. This gentleman, Peter Levenda, did a whole lot of research into this topic. And it talks about the settling of America and how politics is its own religion, how it's rather a cult. And I think that's important for people to know. I don't know if anyone will show up for this who will be interested. I find it fascinating information. They get into CIA mind control, MK Ultra, Manchurian candidates with like Manson and people like that. But in this book, they also talk about land areas and areas where there was a lot of bloodshed or massacres took place. And he gets into the spiritual reasonings as to why these things happened and about how there's been a massive cover up of events and that they were not as that they were more nefarious than people know. That's why it's called Sinister Forces. So we're going to look at that. I had already read the foreword and I posted that to the community tab earlier this morning. So I'm going to share a screen with you. And then I won't have to look at that linen anymore. Here we go. Read all of it. That is not allowed due to copyright issues, and I don't seek to violate those. I appreciate artists, authors, creators like that. But he did his research for this, and it's allegedly true. Book 1 is called The Nine. Now, again, it's by Peter Levenda. Trine Day. Interesting symbolism there. And again, publishing companies are very interesting as well. Franklin, there's that word again. We were just talking about Franklin yesterday. That's wild. For Rose, that's rather, what is that other group called? I have that. The Rosicrucians. That's rather Rosicrucian-ish. Let me get a drink and we'll get started. Today's drink is brought to us by lemons and watermelons. Watermelon lemonade. And it's good. I like it. Okay, so we read the foreword by Jim Haugen, whatever his name is. Oops. Probably shouldn't have done it that way, huh? We read that, and so we're going to jump right in. He has some really interesting artwork in here. There's Moses in all of his horned glory, again, for whatever reason. And here's the introduction. This is A Study in Scarlet. Now, again, I'm not going to read the whole things to you. I want us to be able to look at some of this information on a surface level because it's deep information itself. So a topological look at it will still teach you things, but it might interest you in reading on your own. So it's 10 books in one. This is advanced praise from Norman Mailer. It says, face to face with 25 years of research gathered from no less than 40 countries. Most writers would have looked to come up with any number of spy, horror, and suspense novels suggested by this trove of material. Peter Levenda, however, tackled it head on, so he set himself the near to impossible task of pulling together such diverse threads as pop culture, archaeology, anthropology, poetry, religion, the occult, and a host of government actions overt and hidden. In return, he has produced the first installment of a thesis that is, by turns, compelling, cautious, maddening, and intriguing. This book lives with the premise that there is a satanic undercurrent to American affairs, since there is a world of clues and indications to support the thesis, but very little qualifies as hard evidence. The author is enmeshed in a labyrinth task. Given the bewildering enormity of the attempt, one can forgive sinister forces its serious faults, for its recompense offered astonishing coincidences, improbable but factual interconnections, occasional exposures of buried government history, outright assassinations, and inexplicable historic conjunctions that scream out for explanation where none can be provided. Now, that's not the whole thing, but I wanted you to get an idea of where we're headed with this. Now, I had highlighted, can you see that? Let me make sure things are sharing properly and make sure if I show you something, you can see it. So this is the table of contents and some of the things that I had highlighted there. Section 1, we've got deep background, the Dunwich Horror and Occult History of America. Chapter 2, the Mountains of Madness, American Prehistory and the Occult. Chapter 3, Red Dragon, the Ashland Tragedy. Section 2, Agents of the Devil. Chapter 4, Unholy Alliance, Nazism, Satanism, and Psychological Warfare in the U.S. I'd like to jump in right there because we can always bounce around because of the day that it is, the time that we are in. It's important for people to understand some of these things. And but let's go to chapter 2, the Mountains of Madness, American Prehistory and the Occult. That's page 43. Should we read the intro first, though? Let's do that. And then decide. We'll see how it goes. And to address why I share certain things, like when other people make videos about me or say things about me, and why some things I address and some things I don't. For example, there are people out there accusing clergy and a lot of people of child harming. I, in fact, have said, hey, this, you have to have some type of facts behind that, though, right? Like this person is trying to get the age of consent dropped, or this person only dates people with children this age, or you know what I mean, and only takes jobs where they're alone with children. There has to be some type of evidentiary background to establish some type of intent to do harm to children. You can't just throw things at the wall and hope they stick. That's why I don't address certain things, because number one, we're not supposed to flaunt around like our good deeds. We're not supposed to say, hey, I did this and I do that and I do that and I do the other. When I do share certain things, it's to promote ideas, to be unorthodox and creative when trying to help your community or those you live around, like picking up litter if you see it, carrying a little baggie with you and picking up some litter that might be on the ground so that it doesn't, the story I told him about my dad's bird, so that it doesn't end up somewhere. Why am I telling you this? Because I can't speak from your eyes. I can only speak from my own. So I share to help you to avoid the pitfalls that I fell into, or the pitfalls that I see people are trying to push me into. Because if it's happening to me, then it's happening to other people, because I am not special and I am not above anybody else in that way. We are above people in the hierarchy of natural law and God's hierarchy. If they're demonized or if they are behaving demonic, we are above them in the hierarchy. And we darn well need to act like it and take that responsibility very seriously. So it doesn't matter how many times people try to push me down, kick me down, whatever. It doesn't matter if only 2 people see this video. Then that's 2 people who walk away with a little more information in their spiritual armor as they go about their daily life, which hopefully they apply in some way. That's why I talk about consent, because I allowed mine to be taken from me for so long, and I didn't even realize what I was doing. I thought I was serving. Serving doesn't mean being privy to other people's wickedness, right? Or being, what do they call that? An enabler in somebody else's wickedness. And I want to make it very clear, I'm not a victim. You victimize people when you bully them, but I'm not a victim. If I see someone or another being out there who's being harmed, someone more vulnerable, I will put myself in front of that. So if you want to call me a victim because I'm standing in the gap here where I'm at, then call me that. I want to leave, right? But I'm not going to do that and get outside of God's will. I'm going to do what He asks me to do. This information is information you need. You should ask yourself why a small channel like mine is so attacked. People like me, I shared that channel yesterday, and this person was very jealous because I said, this is a righteous man. When I say righteous, I don't mean self-righteous. I don't mean pride-filled. I mean somebody who's walking upright and seeking truth and exposing wickedness, right? That is walking righteously. That is doing God's will. That's righteous. But the righteousness that we only have because it's Christ inside of us. So I just want to make that clear. I'm not special, but I'm special to God. And so are you, and we're all beloved. So you should quit acting like this because you're making this so much more difficult than it really needs to be for everybody. I'm not going to get into the ramifications of what happens to souls and beings when they intentionally harm other beings, souls, and their journeys. It needs to stop. So here I am doing the Lord's work, I believe, in exposing evil. And I try to do that through pop culture, through movies, through music, and through books, other people's books. Yeah. Introduction, A Study in Scarlet. There's the scarlet thread of murder running through the colorless skin of life, and our duty is to unravel it and isolate it and expose every inch of it. Sherlock Holmes in A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, 1887. August 25th, 2000, Rome. Oh my gosh, that's 2 weeks after my second son was born. It is the centenary of the death of Friedrich Nietzsche, but I am in Rome. A week ago, I was in Turin, standing in the plaza where Nietzsche went insane in January 1889. He saw a horse being whipped in, out of all character, was so moved to compassion that he threw his arms around the horse's neck and suffered a nervous breakdown on the spot. Since then, psychiatrists have been of the opinion that this spontaneous gesture of compassion was so alien to Nietzsche's own writings that it precipitated the breakdown. Compassion, that most un-Darwinian of emotions, went against everything Nietzsche thought he stood for. What blonde beast, its hour come round at last. I am thinking of Nietzsche now in the intense, unforgiving sun of St. Peter's Square in a relentlessly hot August, escorting an American executive, my employer, and his fiancée on a tour of Rome. In a way, I am coming full circle to my childhood from that moment in time, nearly 50 years after my birth, and like Nietzsche, I am confronted with my antithesis. It is not a whipped horse I see before me, however, but as we descend into the crypt below the high altar, it is a small casket said to contain the bones of St. Peter himself, the first pope, and the small rock on which Christ is said to have built his church. Ecce Homo, Nietzsche's last work, finished in the months before he went mad, titled after Pontius Pilate's famous words to the crowd as he asked them to spare the accused, Jesus Christ. Behold the man, St. Peter was murdered. Behold the man. St. Peter was murdered and died a martyr's death. This pilgrimage to make contact with his remains over which the entire edifice of Roman Catholicism has been built, is for me a confrontation with the enemy. And like all true enemies, in his face I see my own. And again, we have somebody writing here who is very anti-Catholicism. There is a false copy of everything that the devil owns. All he owns is the edifice, the facade, the window dressing, the false, counterfeit, plagiaristic, fraudulent forgery. And like that gentleman whose videos that I had shared a few times, and I don't do that with all small channels. I want them to stay humble. Something happens to channels after I share them. I don't want them to be a target by Satan because I share them. So I don't share everybody's videos. Some I share because I'm keeping my eye on them and I know that they're not of God, even though they say they are, which is also fraudulent. That's all Satan does is copy, copy, copy. They're just scratchers. They can't do anything else. They can't create a thing. And I believe that's why my spouse has taken on a look, not feminine, but he looks like he would be related to my mother. That's for a lot of reasons that I'm not going to get into. I suspect things are much worse than I think. But the same spirit will follow certain people just to be there to tempt them, just so that they can accuse them in front of God. And even if you don't give in, they're still going to falsely accuse you. They still don't remember anything the way you remember it. Mandela effect is this also a separating of the chaff from the wheat. It is the wheat being separated from the tares. And by separated, I mean gone through and looked at and set aside. It has not been obviously burned up yet. Now, so again, we're going to be careful here. I'm not telling you to accept, receive, and believe everything that comes out of this book. I'm telling you there's information here that you should hear and make your own decision. Christ was executed according to the official version of the story, although this has always been in doubt both among historians and among members of Western secret societies. His chosen successor, Simon Peter, in whose basilica I now stand, was also executed and in fact crucified upside down. St. Peter's cross in a reverse crucifix, such as those the Satanists wear, perhaps marking them as more Christian than they would be comfortable knowing. St. Andrew was also crucified, he of the X-shaped cross. That's interesting. Why the X? Hold, please. I'm going to make a note. St. Andrew. Because the X is prevalent now, no? So we need to, when these synchronicities or coincidences come up, we need to look into them. That's, there's a reason your subconscious is drawn to certain things. And every Catholic church must have the mortal remains of some saint present in the altar stone. It is, with its gruesome crucified Jesus and saints missing eyes and being roasted alive or torn to pieces, a bloody religion. A faith built on aggression and murder, madness and sacrifice, the Passion. And again, now I don't know if I want to read this book to you guys. But make your own decisions. I totally disagree with that. And this is where people's biases come in. Like, what do you want to reveal here and why if you're so anti this? The church bureaucracy, right? The politics of the church, and this is my goal here, is to separate the wheat from the chaff. The politics of the beast is the counterfeit of true religion or faith, a true faith system. They have nothing else. They have no next life. They have no eternity to be concerned with how they behave here, so they feel they can do anything they want here. Politics is their religion, all right? Was Catholicism and Christianity bloody? Yes, but not entirely due to their own doing. But sometimes the Catholic Church, like Joan of Arc, burned its own. And that is a thing they will have to answer to God for, I believe. I love the doctrine. I love the Mass. I love how they explain things to you. If you go to a Baptist church or a Protestant church, it's mostly people guessing. And that's not good. I don't think. But you have this society today where people don't understand how to do proper research and their biases lead them, and oftentimes. So it's not just Christians that were bloody. we came to stop paganisms. They were killing everybody and eating them. So God told us to put a temple on top of every pagan site. But just like the Canaanites, and I don't know, I wasn't there, but just like the Canaanites, when God wasn't being a homicidal maniac. That was their judgment. God brought judgment upon the Canaanites, every man, woman, and child, to be ended because of their behavior. Is that what you want for America? For God to give that mandate to his holy angels, who very well might be partly technological. Think the movie 9 a little bit. And they help control weather and all this stuff. The 4 angels control the winds. You know, you have Christians talking about it's all modified weather. I think that they're absolutely trying to instigate things with the weather, but I don't think any of it works because it is God, right? God does what God will do. If he allows a thing, he allows it for the sake of those who love him and those that he loves, his children. Not everyone here apparently is of his children, and I know because I deal with these people. Speaking of which, I gotta tell you a weird story time. It's just like gonna be a 5-minute video, but it's a weird one. Okay. And now I pass the sarcophagi containing the remains of the dead popes buried beneath the nave of St. Peter's Basilica, or death. I know, death in everlasting rows, quiet chapels, and candles burning alone in silence. They want you to remember that you have that day coming. It's your day of judgment. You need to know that you are vulnerable, that you aren't the being at the top of everything. You're at the top of your own self, your own hierarchy. You can even reject God if you want. I would advise you not to do that. You should not reject the one who made you. What is so hard? I don't understand what's so hard to understand about that. It says, and then the sarcophagi of Pope John Paul I, he was Pope for a month and then he died mysteriously, to be sure. There's evidence to suggest he was ended, volumes of evidence, and as in the Kennedy assassinations, the spore of conspiracy and hatred. I saw a strange video with that the other day where they actually showed it. Somebody had the full clip, and he doesn't look like a person. Like it, I'm starting to wonder why all of these individuals are attempted to be ended when there's cameras around. And then they got to go around and get the films, right? And control the narrative. But why would they go about without a cover held up? Man, these synthetic human thing's been around for a minute. I don't care what anyone thinks. I don't believe in clones, but I think they're synthetic humans. Like electrical units and batteries on the inside and skin on the outside, and they look a lot better than people know. And I've done videos on that with Winona and Martin Lawrence and that wrestler Jackson guy. So Kennedy, if you see that video, you don't see any like they say that she was on top of the car because of brain matter, and I don't know if I believe that. Because she also looked different after that day. And when I saw this video not too long ago, a few days ago, it almost looked like he was a droid. Like that was not organic, whatever that was. Okay, so here we go. Sorry. Anyways, moving on. A first-class relic is a piece of the saint's flesh or blood or bone. A second-class relic is something the saint is known to have touched, such as clothing or worn. A third-class relic is something touched to a first-class relic. I'm describing Catholic ritual and religion to my guests. They are Lutheran and Methodist, respectively. The woman has wanted to visit the Sistine Chapel since she was 12. We've already done that, me standing aside and staring up at the creation in Adam and Eve in the garden, not looking too closely at the huge Last Judgment, not being the type who slows down on the highway to gaze at accident victims. If the blood and bones of saints are relics, what are the blood and bones of the common person? The murder victim, the self-deletion, the casualty of war. What secret power lies forgotten in their graves, their dump sites, their formaldehyde? Interesting. Jars on a serial killer's shelf. What great beast, its hour has come round at last. Everywhere around me are images of PO'd prophets, Moses, forever the type A executive, smashing and smoting and scolding everyone in sight, taking on the Egyptians, a man who has the cojones to ask God for a photostat of the 10 commandments after he, Moses, smashes the first set in anger at his own people. Tell me God is forgiving. You've got to be on pretty intimate terms with the Creator to go up on the mountain a second time. Moses on some statuary is shown with horns on his head. And then there are Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, full of dire warnings and frightening predictions. John the Baptist, not the sort you would want to invite to your GOP fundraiser. Dangers all around us, trust no one. The presence of Satan is everywhere implicit. But who is he? Boogeyman. The word comes from the Russian bog, meaning God. Wow. Really? Because we were looking at Boogeyman when we were talking about Slender Man a little bit, which I'm sure we'll have to revisit. But the word comes from the Russian bog, meaning God. I thought it would have been had German roots, because everything that we've looked into regarding like what I thought were boogeymen went to with a German etymology and or folklore. And you can go back to that video and check that out. Boogeyman means little g God. I stand a little apart as the executive and his fiancée approach the glass window that opens out onto St. Peter's own resting place. It was to Peter that Jesus said, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Yeah, I don't like that either. I am nervous. And they say keep your enemies close, or your friends close and your enemies closer. Like, Satan was following them around. And that he could have an corporeal body. I don't know, that's always bothered me. I am nervous. The crowds are too thick, this being a Jubilee year and what the Italian papers are calling La Woodstock del Pape. There is no possibility, and it's a Jubilee this year. So this was written, 25 years ago already? Wow. There is no possibility of silent contemplation of St. Peter's, this bit anyway, remains. No chance for a psychic connection with the founder of the Christian organization. I glance to my right. There's a metal box there. Peter's pence. It says, you're supposed to make a donation. Yeah, Judas, more Judas. God wouldn't have wanted that. Like, he just wouldn't. Like, I see it now. Like, he wouldn't have used money. He wouldn't have needed to. Even St. Peter's Basilica is not immune, not even the bones of Peter himself. There is no way to avoid the collection plate, the thick envelope, the outstretched manicured hand. I know. A few feet away, John Paul I lies in a plain, unassuming box, while all around him, the bodies of popes who went along to get along are buried and carved in marble splendor. Imagine that. Pope John Paul I is just in a simple box, and he probably really is someone who was special to God. He probably was at least trying to be one of God's children. And get thee behind me, Satan. I am thinking of Nietzsche again as we make our way over to the gift shop to organize the purchase of a poster of the Sistine ceiling, or Il Volto, as they say in Italian, the vault, a souvenir of the journey for the fiancé who believes in vampires and crystals, and the Knights Templar and Rosalind. She already has a poster of that famous scene from the chapel, the one where God leans over, almost but not quite, touches the languid fingertip of Adam. I sometimes wonder if Adam and God are actually pointing at each other, challenging the other to take the blame for what can only be a pretty messed up creation. I don't agree entirely with that, but I do believe we've messed things up. Like, this is our domain down here, and we've messed it up. And we're waiting for someone to come rescue us, like always. But we don't want to go to God, the one who made us, and then get up and try to just do a little bit better and a little bit different every day. That's too difficult for most people. Like, stuff and things, is it really worth any of this? An eternal life for what? Your life isn't eternal. You're stealing the louche and essence of other beings. You're a parasite. And you're doing it of children who aren't even your own. And that's the rub. And this is why I tell you that right now you should be vegan, because they're giving us what we give. If we're taking, and please listen to me, for your own sake, not for mine. I'm not preaching. Just think of this, because this is how they think. I know. I've lived around them my whole life. The spirit that was in my mother, or whatever, has followed me my whole life. It gave me a break for a while because it was with her. But anyways, if we are taking baby calves from their moms, right, so that we can have the milk that was intended for the calf, and the calf gets ended because somebody wants milk and cream in their coffee. Missing 411, children get taken from their mothers so that their essence, their loosh, can be sucked off of. And you give consent when you participate in it, and you do it to animals. So things that think they're above you in the hierarchy or trick you into believing they're above you come into your home and family unawares and take children. That's how they're doing this right now. It's karma. They're operating. They're also operating on like a system of belief, right? What you believe. Now, again, why is God allowing this to happen? Because he has said, this is what you wanted. You wanted your will. Here, this is it. And this is the result that we've had the last 4 like insane years that I couldn't even, for me, it's like a fever dream. It's a personal nightmare because everything I loved has been in one way or another attacked. Pittsburgh, France, the Olympics. I'm sure figure skaters in some way, and artists because of AI. Like every niche that I dwell in, even a little bit, is being attacked. So I know how this being, this Antichrist spirit, operates in people. Christ did no harm. Remember that. Okay. There is supposed to be tension in that painting, the tension of a gun about to go off. As I wrote once long ago, I have respect for God, the same respect I have for a loaded pew-pew or the hand that holds it. And God is the only safe thing to be. And Nietzsche wrote, we should reconsider cruelty and open our eyes. Almost everything we call higher culture is based on the spiritualization of cruelty, on its becoming more profound. This is my proposition. That savage animal has not really been mortified. It lives and flourishes. It has merely become divine. The great epochs of our life come when we gain the courage to rechristen our evil as what is best in us. Rechristen our evil, an unintended irony. Yeah, really. We find a taxi to take us back to the okay, so what he's doing here is, there we go. So he's dropped them off. He's back in his hotel, but in the back of my mind glows the small casket of St. Peter's remains, a silvered shadow of Satan, and the last crazed moment of Nietzsche in Turin, embracing a startled horse and asking for forgiveness and love and going insane. He wasn't going insane, though. He was turning sane. He saw a horse being misused and abused, a big, beautiful, bountiful animal that could have stompled and trampled whoever was whipping it, probably. Much bigger, right, than a human. But it didn't, still. And it was being, whipped. And he apologized. That's something you see vegans do today. I ate animals for much too long, and I let people around me like your group, your family and your circle, they will start to shun you for these things, and they start to make fun of you, like your own. And the Bible is right, like your own household becomes your enemy. And I don't mean to say that I hate them, because I don't. We're not called to hate, and I just don't have that in me. Christ did not harm anyone. Now, if words and truth hurt you, you need to take that and be alone with it and figure out what kind of individual you are. So Nietzsche wasn't going insane. He was going sane. He realized all the suffering that could be ended. We could end 80% of suffering on this earth ourselves. It is not God doing it. It's us. We're allowing ourselves to be influenced by things that hate us. They hate us. They don't want our well-being. They're going to tell us things that do us harm, that do others harm. They're going to instigate us and persuade us. They're going to come in between you and your family. They're going to tempt you. And while they're tempting you, you bet there's someone tempting your spouse. It all goes both ways, all of this. And that's what God has done at this point. He's like this is your domain. 85 to 90% of the suffering on this realm, on this plane right now, could be stopped by us if everybody stopped participating in the harming of animals, stop eating it, stop buying it. You're not going to die. You're not. You can be eternal if you stop doing things like that. Like, but that has drove everyone insane. So they see someone acting compassionately, especially if it's out of their nature, and they call that insanity. What kind of place is this? It's a joke. It's a joke. And people are raising children to be this way, to be hateful. I know, because I was raised with people like that. It's all intentional. Like all journeys of 1,000 miles, this one began with a single step. It was an article in the Village Voice by Craig Carpel entitled Patriotic Witchcraft, and in 2 parts, The Voice is a weekly newspaper, and I waited eagerly for the following week's conclusion. It was the time of Watergate, and I was wallowing. Watergate is what should have told everybody that they were being monitored at that time, that your appliances and this Fair Technological Act that they passed so that even people in the ghetto could have refrigerators and stoves or whatever. Everything was given a freaking surveillance bug. Everything. Watergate was to show you that. When they show you things that is going on with the president, or they show you things in public, it is to let, hey, this is happening. You can stop it. All you got to do is say, I don't consent. They want to let you, and again, is it the wicked ones letting you know what they're doing, or is it the good ones trying to bring it to your awareness? There's debate about that. I'm sure there always will be. I worked during the day for the Benedict. Okay, so I don't want to do this part. We're gonna go down. We're gonna get to some meat here, since we're halfway through this video. Okay. In the hollers of rural West Virginia during a thunderstorm, the tale of that trip comes later in this book. Suffice it to say that I found more than I bargained for in Ashland. Ashland is the place in North Carolina that was walloped by Helene. And again, if it was not weather warcraft, then it was God's angels passing judgment that God mandated. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't help your neighbors because of that. That's not what I'm meaning. I'm meaning God cleanses a place and God wakes people up. I'm sure that place, that event probably has many people praying that weren't praying before. And it's not because he's arrogant. It has nothing to do, that's the people that think these things and put out these false information. It's just terrible. And they're obviously not parents, or if they are parents, they're horrid parents. Horrid. Discipline is necessary. Only someone that loves you is going to tell you no. Don't do that. It will hurt you. That's love. Okay, so in Ashland, he found ancient Indian burial mounds in the center of town. In the center of town. A large house that was moved entire from its original site to one a few streets over, directly on a line with burial mounds, and sporting a pair of griffins on its roof, mythical creatures according to the town's own brochure, designed to ward off evil spirits. The Ashland Tragedy and Massacre, a savage ending of 3 children on a Christmas Eve in the late 19th century, the subsequent arrest of 3 suspects, and a massacre of townspeople by militia detailed to protect the suspects from a lynching. Oh, really? Oddest of all, the fact that a Manson relative and sometime petty crook, Darwin Scott, was brutally ended with a kitchen knife in Ashland a few months before the celebrated Tate LaBianca endings, a murder case that has still never been solved. And there are true crime channels everywhere that say these words. So again, when I start just saying them or whatever, or when I do say them, you're going to have to then, that's fraud too. You got to go ding everyone's channel, and I will go comment on every true crime channel myself. Like, I'm done with this. People that don't even know basic law. Where have the smart people gone? Like, what's happened to everybody? And it would be one thing if it was just on the internet, and I'd say, well, it's just my dead internet, and my like 3 monitors. No. And that's why they're doing this. They can't tell you you can't do things. They can only manipulate you or coerce you because you're higher than them in the hierarchy. We're dealing with other beings. True witches aren't people who play with crystals. True witches are a different species, and they steal our children. You should be very angry about that. How many more kids need to be taken before somebody gets it? And they say, oh yeah, this is not normal behavior for human beings. We don't do these things. It is said that Kentucky is an Indian word that means dark and bloody ground. I wondered if it was true. And Indian by Native American, indigenous. Again, this book is old. If a physical place could be evil, could hold a curse that would affect generations of residents to come, did the indigenous know something we didn't? Or did we unconsciously suspect that the earth held some sinister secret? Indeed, the name first proposed for the Commonwealth of Kentucky was Transylvania. Oh my gosh, man. And then I remembered the words of Cotton Mather, he of the Salem witch trials in 17th century Massachusetts, who said that America had been the devil's land before the Europeans came, and wondered if he meant more than simply the Native Americans were not Christians. Oh, he meant more than that. Native Americans, again, they have rules of life, they have doctrine that they follow as well. They don't believe in doing harm unless when they hunt and they take an animal, right? They do a blessing. They thank the spirit of the animal and they send it off in peace to the Lord. In your mind, if you see that, again, they're the true Jewish people. They're the true Israelites, whatever word they have changed God's children to this day. America's Israel. Like, that's the first thing people need to, like, they rename everything. Themselves, their families, they rename everything. And then there were the stories of H.P. Lovecraft, the father of Gothic horror, who felt that there was something ancient and evil beneath the hardscrabble New England soil, a concept amplified by Shirley Jackson in her stories of the New England haunted houses and depraved villages. After all, America has had its share of misery and tragedy, regardless of the beautiful words and even more beautiful intentions of the Declaration of Independence and Constitution. Why would a fertile and bountiful land, colonized by pious and fervent European Christians of every variety, descend into the maelstrom of civil war, slavery, mass murder, assassinations, and day to day violence that shocks the rest of the world, even as the rest of the world has had to deal with the Kaisers and the Hitlers and the Mussolinis and the Stalins and the Mayos and the Hirohitos? Do we have more than our share of violence, or is it simply that we get more press, more PR, public relations, press? Was the answer to be found in unraveling the skin of violence itself, like the scarlet thread of murder in the very first Sherlock Holmes story? Was I wrong to look at religious history, occult history? It bore such interesting and convincing fruit in my Nazi study, yet surely the roots of American violence and American evil cannot grow from the same metaphysical soil. And let me say something else here. People lie. Just because someone says they're a Christian, that doesn't mean anything. Do you know Jesus? Okay? Because he wasn't Christian. He wasn't. He was, and he told you to pray to the Father, which I do in his name. It's just some of these things that have been mistaught for so long and nobody's ever just said, man, I think you're wrong or I think you might be lying. And that's the thing. When something is fraudulent, it's only a facade, right? I have a real tiny book of Pinocchio here. I could tell you I have the classic story of Pinocchio. It's, the original story. I love it. Blase, blase. But what if I took all those pages out and all you had was the covers and there was nothing in there? That's a facade, emptiness on the inside. Like the houses in Western movies where they have like this thing and like you see the buildings, like the front of the buildings is all connected, right? It has the shop names. That's just put onto the little boxes after the boxes are built. After the individual boxes are built, or one big box, and they make it 4 boxes, then you take the storefront and you pop that on front. That's a facade, right? So when I say facade, I mean like a forgery, a fake, a counterfeit, something you can poke holes in. And I've poked holes in every part of my life at this point, like every part. So I don't know how fake all this is. I don't know if we're in a simulacron or whatever that word is. Um, but I know that we're not supposed to do harm. So I know that sentient life is important and valuable and exists, right? Like those should be basics. Now, if these people coming over said they were Christians or when history was rewritten, right? And people saw, Christians took over, the Catholics took over, whatever happened there, which is for another day. You had all these people who were of the occult, of the political witchcraft, or whatever you want to call it. And they didn't want to be killed, obviously. They didn't want to be ended in some new massacre. So they said they were Christians, even though they were not. Just because somebody says they're of something does not make it so. As I poke through the debris of American history, the autopsy photos and the police reports and the political manifestos and trial transcripts and the confessions and lies and declassified documents and bureaucratic memoranda, I saw that American history cannot be separated from my own history or from world history, that as Americans, we can't look objectively at our own story. Like that famous conundrum in quantum physics, the observer changes the event observed. Is the Kennedy assassination a particle or a wave? That's the ever ending question with quantum mechanics for me. Is that a particle or is that a wave? Is this event part of the wave, or is it the whole wave? During the Watergate era, a somewhat unsettling revelation was made that for 25 years or more, the CIA had conducted psychological experimentation. So, again, when these YouTubers call something a conspiracy theory, that doesn't make it so. It means they're young and they have not educated themselves and done proper due diligence, which means research, because they don't want to get up off their butts and go to an actual library and pick up an actual book. And they're relying on Google, hoping it, gives whatever first answer it gives them, that's what they go with. That's not how research goes. When you go to a library, you have do I want this one? Is this going to give me the answer to my question that I'm looking for? Do I look here? Like, it's a process, and it's a good process. Due diligence is important. You can't just parrot things because somebody gets views. This is why money is the root of all evil. Just look at it. We can't even get honest news because it's motivated by money. Even the independent media now is all is all based on views and monetization. They won't say certain things because the monetization will get taken away. They've already won in that case. Me, I've already won. That's why they give me such a hard time. I got Jesus. I got them in checkmate. God just has to sweep up the board. That's it. It's done. It is finished. Ow. Okay, so they had conducted psychological experimentation upon both volunteers and unwitting subjects, both at home and abroad, to find the key to the unconscious mind, to memory, and to volition, which is free will. Their goal was to create the perfect assassin and to protect America from programmed assassins of other countries. This project was known by the name MK Ultra, but it had its origins in earlier forms of the same brainwashing, quote unquote, agenda. Operations Bluebird and Artichoke. To me, this was astounding. A U.S. government agency was conducting what, to a medievalist, could only be characterized as a search for the philosopher's stone, for occult power, for magical spells and talismans. And that is what it is. Because volition, right? They want to unlock somebody else's mind. They're looking for how to control your free will, and they're looking for that soul essence. The question is why? Why are you looking for that? What do people look for? Things they don't have. That's how you know not everyone here is of God, because not everyone has a soul. If they are looking for it, it's because they're seeking it and they want it and need it because they don't already have one. Now, did God actually make these individuals? No, they're probably, again, Satan's copies somehow. I don't have all the answers though. Like, please. Okay, indeed, some of the CIA's sub-projects included research among psychics, mediums, magicians, and witches of America and beyond. And the Army was not far behind in its mind control testing, as we shall see. As I've said, I've always had military around me. It's like I'm some asset and they're just not allowed to tell me. I don't know. It's bizarre. But the last several years, obviously, things have been really amped up. And again, this is a time when they want people like me gone. They tested me. They found I was unworthy. I would not lie, cheat, and steal continuously. I got to a point where my conscience kicked in, and they don't want people like that. You shouldn't want people like that running your society. You just shouldn't. We should turn all of the screens off, not give them any of our attention. I didn't know you were going to do this, that, or the other. Who knew? I don't know. There's a deception regarding weaponry right now too, and ammunition. I'm waiting on the rest of the message from the Lord. But he says that there are certain things. You know how England, like, you're not allowed to have pew-pews there. How do I put this? We are in a dystopian society. We were born into it. Eventually, supply will start running out unless somebody else is making it. And if we're not making it currently because we lost the know-how, and that I believe, you can't lose the tech to get to the moon, but with a generation of dumbing down, you can forget basic, skills and foundational abilities you've had before. Okay, so what was even more disturbing was the revelation that nearly all records of this incredible and superhumanly ambitious project were destroyed in 1973. On orders of the CIA director Richard Helms himself, in his testimony, he claimed that MKUltra did not come up with anything worthwhile and that the project had been terminated. Then why were the documents shredded? We do not know who the test subjects were. We don't know what was done to them. We don't know how they have been programmed, if at all. We don't know what they might do or what they have already done. And see, they don't like me for that either. Their programming didn't work for me because I have compassion. I'm a pacifist. Like, I don't want to touch weapons of that kind. I can do things if I have to with a basic camping knife, right? Like, I don't have the need for it in my life, but I don't judge others for protecting their family. That is what they think they have to do. But again, what is mind control? What was a part of MK Ultra? It was setting test subjects in front of a screen with flickering images and subliminal messages. They don't need re-education camps because you pay for your own, you live in it. You sit every day, you watch their programming and the flickering lights and the flickering scenes and the subliminal messages that are behind that. They get you in that alpha state. And you're walking around like this and you're driving to work and you can't remember how you got to work. And you don't think that's a problem. Well, it's just by habit I drove to work. No, man, you need to be consciously aware. You're on the road with other people. They run this stuff on people right in their own homes, and we pay for the abuse. Energy is already free. The grid is already here. Most of these people, I'm convinced at this point, at least around me, don't even know how to fix it. Like if something broke, they'd have no clue or concept because they've forgotten basics when it comes to. I can't get into it. And is it everybody? No, but it's a high majority of people. As I stood in the park in Ashland, oh, sorry. We do know, however, that some of our more colorful criminals have spent time at the same institutions receiving CIA MK Ultra funding for this special testing. People like Charles Manson and Henry Lee Lucas, for instance, as well as Sink, the leader of the Symbionese Liberation Army that kidnapped heiress Patty Hearst. It is entirely possible, given evidence at our disposal, that convicted serial killer Arthur Shawcross is also such an example. As I stood in the park at Ashland staring at the ancient burial mounds and looking up the house with griffins, I realized I was standing at a nexus of American history and culture. Charles Manson, unsolved homicides, mind control experiments, mass murder, and massacres. And I wondered what Indian burial mounds and griffins, movie stars and spies, witches and Washington, even UFOs and occultists, had to do with any of it. Our culture in the West was formed as it is by a faith in science, a reliance on the technological. And that's the problem, you see, because that's fallible. When your faith is built on something that is fallible, you're trying to build on sand, man. You can't build on sand. What happens when you build on sand? Things fall apart, or eventually you sink, or you're washed over by a ginormous wave. Like, sand is no good for building. Don't build on sand. Has convinced us to ignore the unseen. Yeah, exactly. There is a web of connections between visible events and visible, measurable phenomena that we cannot see, measure. That we cannot see, cannot measure. So our response has been to ignore this web in favor of what we can see and measure. The blind leading the blind. The drunk looking for his keys under a lamppost because the light is better there. We know, can describe the stages of growth of flowers, animals, people, but not the life force itself, the drive. What engineer, inventor, and mystic Arthur Young called the quantum of action. Of this we know nothing and are happy to know nothing. And thus we become victims. I should end that there. You're all creating the victim mentality and victim society. You're all doing it. You're bullies. You have no life. If you hate people so badly, then why bother them? Leave them alone. University of Chicago professor Iwan Kulinow was able to show that the technique of secret links and correspondences between objects and events discovered by a Renaissance magician, Giordano Bruno, are applicable to mind control and psychological warfare today. A magician. Charles Manson declared himself to be a reincarnation of Bruno, an oddly sophisticated choice for the nearly illiterate convicted murderer. Professor Kulinow himself was murdered in 91. Another crime that has never been solved. And they should all be solved. If you got cameras everywhere, they should all be solved. All these people need to be ignored and everyone needs to just turn their back on this system. You could fight it, but that's not going to work, I don't think. Who can fight the beast? And see, the Bible's asking. It doesn't say nobody can fight it. It's saying who can fight it. I'm sure not. I might not be fighting the way it understands, but I'm fighting. And so are you. And I love you. Just in case you haven't heard it today, I love you. I'm proud of you. You're doing a good job. You're appreciated and you are beloved. And God is merciful and forgiving. He prefers obedience to sacrifice, and he prefers love to obedience. There is something over obedience, gang. Most people don't get that far. The people we trust are those who can measure the measurable. The people we distrust are those who point to the invisible and shout to get our attention. There goes that ringing. Our world is marching calmly to an obscure and unknowable end because we, the people, hear the drum, feel the beat, know our place in line. That's better somehow than jumping off the path into the dark forest where God dwells like a hungry tiger. There is too much personal responsibility in jumping out of line. If you then try to jump back in, you will find you have lost your place, and your fellow marchers no longer want you to join them. You are dirty, you are crazed, you have seen what they are afraid to see. They shun you. In order to conduct this investigation, I would have to dig very deep below the surface of official reports, trial transcripts, and conspiracy theories. I would have to dig below the surface of the American psyche and trace pieces of the evidence back down through several layers. Okay. Academia frowns upon historians who get involved with their subject personally. It is believed such activity ruins objectivity, makes the historian's findings suspect. Yet it is virtually impossible for any American my age, born in 1950, to approach such subject matter as the Kennedy assassinations or the Manson killings with pure, detached objectivity. We lived through it all. We either marched on Washington or marched in the jungles of Southeast Asia. We know where we were when Kennedy was ended and when the World Trade Center went down. We are connected to these events and cannot extricate ourselves from them, even when we let the documents and the primary sources speak for themselves. For there are documents and there is blood. Politics and religion both are born of documents and of blood. And both documents and blood form the primary sources of the following investigation. This is a book about evil, evil ordinary and extraordinary, evil vigilant, evil militant, evil triumphant, ancient evil and modern evil, violent and discreet, beautiful and obscene, evil in the face of God, of man and woman, of children, the evil vainglorious men and their hollow minions, evil unseen and fierce, the evil of body bags and spent cartridges, of mass graves and crematoria, of crimes against nature and against heaven, the evil of death, and derangement, of murder, of madness, of suicide, and Satanism. This is the evil that is older than humanity, but reflected in our children's eyes. The evil we can't grasp, cannot punish, cannot destroy. The evil that contaminates souls as well as bodies, nations as well as people. This is a book about the evil spirits that haunt America, about the sinister forces that rule the world of our dreams, our nightmares, and our sober, trembling, waking reality. If it is true that the gods, little g, of one religion become the demons of the one that replaces it, then we in America must deal with generations of demons once worshipped here, who now wander the countryside, the city streets, the interstate highways, and the dead end roads, the theme parks and fast food restaurants, the shopping malls and parking lots, the peep show parlors and cathedral aisles, like hungry ghosts on a mission from Hades. We gaze with horror on their crimes and don't understand. We stare into the eyes of their hideous creatures and don't understand. We clean up the crime scenes and mop up the blood and don't understand. We imprison, institutionalize, execute to make it all go away and don't understand. We're doing it. This book is an attempt at understanding. The premise is one that has been embraced by psychoanalysts like Jung and psychics, physicists like Pauli. The existence of another mechanism in the universe that binds together events seemingly unrelated. The perspective offered is unique, dangerous, incredible, possibly offensive. The subject matter, serial, homicide, genocide, assassination, you see all that there, makes it impossible to be anything else. We cannot begin to heal until we have identified the dis-ease. I have said that so many times. Order of operations. We have to diagnose the problem. If you go to a mechanic, is he just instantly going to start tearing up your engine and removing it and replacing it? God, I hope not. I hope not. But this is where we're at. We, in order to understand America and America's place in the world, must do the same. We must plumb the depths of the American psyche and the American unconscious and dredge up whatever we find before it's too late. How late is it? listen in the middle of the night. Turn off the television, the radio, the CD player, the computer, unplug the telephone, turn off the lights. What do you hear? Beneath the silence and the stoic beating of your humble heart, what do you hear? Can you hear your soul singing? Or is it Satan laughing? Next, we have a picture of the Serpent Mound. I live in Ohio and have not seen it. Like, I want to see it, but everyone says, oh, it's a wicked place. But again, we're going off of things that other people tell us about symbolism. We don't even know because these people, I mean, if they are here, they're not talking anymore to us, or they don't remember they are those people. I always ask you, what happened to the ancient Mayans? What if they were just reset and put somewhere else on the earth until such a time as which, they left their murderous ways and repented of that and went another direction of love and kindness, the way of God. If your religion is not of love and kindness, it's not of the true God, and the true God is in charge of all the little g gods. So I go right to him because I don't know who to trust either. One of the most spectacular North American mounds is the Serpent Mound in Adams County, Ohio. The structure, like bookends, is 1,331 feet, 1,331 feet in length from end to end, and is placed on a hill that rises 150 feet above the bordering creek. The mound, usually attributed to religious observations, is generally explained as a snake swallowing an egg or a frog. A 19th century local preacher was reported to have said the mound was erected by the Almighty himself in remembrance of the expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden, which the preacher said was originally nearby. The Garden of Eden in Ohio? You don't say. Uh-oh. I smell another mystery. Interesting. W.H. Holmes in 1886 postulated that observances were held in the oval, which he felt represented the heart of the animal. Dr. F. Larkin in 1880 opined that the serpent with them was symbolic of a devil or infernal spirit whose sparkling eyes would point to the slumbering fires within, which would engulf them in everlasting pain and destruction, and that this great effigy was built with open mouth, ready to devour its prey, to warn their fellow men to avoid the fatal snares of their hated enemy. That sounds, I mean, that's pretty and all, but that sounds kind of like hogwash. Section 1, Deep Background. In the colonial period, when religious creeds, okay, do we want to? We'll read this quote. In the colonial period, when religious creeds, institutions, and communities exerted a major impact on life and work, there was bound to be some spillover into politics. Because the contribution of religion to American political culture covers such important beliefs as obedience, the design of the government, and the national mission, the religious roots of American political culture merit close investigation. Right. It's the obedience part, right? Like, I do think we should obey natural law. I think there are certain things that are blatantly obvious and should be blatantly obvious, right? To people. A man is a man, a woman is a woman, a child is a child for now. A squirrel is a squirrel. It shouldn't be mating with chipmunks over there, Like, natural law exists to keep some semblance of order. But that mostly runs in the background if it's not interfered with, and the same should be said of us. But to obey your government in the face of tyranny, even, and I've seen it in the stuff that the Catholic channels are promoting right now about martyred saints. It's everywhere. So, like, I know what time they want it to be, but why? Why do you want so much blood spill? And they need to understand their sacrifices don't go to that little g God. There are some souls, that soul is not, some souls go to heaven and some, need refinement. Some go to purgatory. I believe we go to different places. I don't know. The way that people understand certain things now. So this is H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft. Born in 1890. I think that last name must be a pseudonym or something because, like, Lovecraft, he loves the craft. I don't know. Born in 1890, wrote weird stories from an early age. Illness interrupted his education many times, so he turned to the reading on his own and soon began to develop his writing talents. He published his first story, The Alchemist, in 1916 and continued until his death in 1937. Lovecraft populated his stories with mythic creatures, mixing fantasy and prehistory, and created a new genre of literature with legions of followers that continue today. Above is a drawing done by Lovecraft himself in 1934 of one of his main creations, Cthulhu. How gross is it? I've read Lovecraft when I was younger. Chapter 1, The Dunwich Horror and Occult History of America. Now, that's funny. I was just talking about druids in yesterday's video, and there it is. See, at least you know I don't talk bollocks to you. I don't just tell you garbage, and if I find out I'm wrong about something, I try to correct myself. Okay, let's see if everything looks okay over here still. I've been reading and haven't even checked on anything over here. I don't know if anyone has listened, has watched, cares to watch, but again, I think it's information that we need. So I'll do a little more for today and kind of a little like skim through, and then I'll end this video and decide on how this goes. I'll decide if I'll do more reading from this book. Again, it's a series of 3. And book 2 is the really, like, it's fascinating to me, like the topics in there. History and probably has always bored me because most of it is hogwash. So when a rise in the road brings the mountains in view above the deep woods, the feeling of strange uneasiness is increased. The summits are too rounded and symmetrical to give a sense of comfort and naturalness, and sometimes the sky silhouettes with a special clearness the queer circles of tall stone pillars with which most of them are crowned. The Dunwich Horror, H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft was writing in the 1920s when most of his more famous stories were published. He was writing of a New England that, in his imagination, had ancient roots in unknown cultures, where druidic circles and pagan chants would infest the countryside. So, did his writing prompt these things to happen in America, or was he giving us truth in his writing? It's so hard to say, like, self-fulfilled prophecies are a funny thing. Okay, he peppered his stories with references to the works of archaeologists and anthropologists, some real, some fictitious, and connected to the American Indian culture, to the worship of strange, perhaps extraplanetary or extra-dimensional beings who viewed humans as little more than undercooked hors d'oeuvres, which is actually true. That's how the fallen see us. His work has attracted a great deal of attention in the past 30 years. And see, this guy was from the early 1900s. And he's doing research into and connecting American Indian culture to the worship of strange, perhaps extraplanetary or extra-dimensional beings. The fallen, the shining ones. His work has attracted a great deal of attention in the past 30 years or so. Oddly enough, in France, stop it. Just leave my homeland alone. Leave it all alone. His work has attracted a great deal of attention in the past 30 years or so, oddly enough, in France, where, like the films of Jerry Lewis, he is an adopted obsession, but also certainly in America, where he maintains a cult status even now, more than 60 years after his death. He has attracted serious, albeit fringe, attention from academics and historians of both literature and mysticism, and has even been graced with an anthology of his work prefaced by no less a literary light than Joyce Carol Oates, the blind Argentine author of many essays and stories of the macabre. Okay, blase blase. Let's get through this. Oh, an author of Gothic horror fiction and the rituals of modern ceremonial magic and communication with extraterrestrial intelligences. Part of the reason for Lovecraft's popularity among serious occultists is due to the fact that many of the ideas he put forward in his stories have found some basis in reality, in historical, archaeological, anthropological reality. While there is no evidence at this time for the existence of beings of which he wrote, Cthulhu chief among them, but let's not forget Yog Sothoth or Shub, I'm not saying these names. There is evidence that America was visited and possibly inhabited for some time by peoples who are not racially, or at least culturally, identical to the Native American Indian tribes that exist today. Boy, that's a loaded statement. Especially considering my playlist, America is Israel. The schools of thought over this are contentious and emotional in defending their respective positions. The group most consistently under attack are diffusionists, whose most famous proponent was that late Harvard professor Barry Fell, who adhered to the idea that America was not settled by a single group of wanderers from Asia across the Bering Strait, but by different groups of people from different parts of the globe. Yeah, I'd agree with that. There is growing archaeological evidence. All you got to do is look at the history. Like, if that part's true, where people settled in the names by their surnames. Like I said, there was French order mail order brides. I had no idea that the French took place in settling things other than when the French Indian War came along and that whole thing. Like, when they say everybody came over on Plymouth Rock, like, I'm still a kid in that way thinking that's how they came. I had no reason to research some of this until I did, right? Until I realized, wait, there's a problem. This is not looking like the America that I've read about all these years in school, right? And it's not looking like it did even 5 years ago. I apologize. There is growing archaeological evidence that people from Europe and North Africa settled in North and South America thousands of years ago, bringing with them their languages, their culture, and religious and mystical beliefs. And therein lies a tale. We won't examine all this in chapter 2. For now, though, let's look at some well-known stories, but from a different perspective and with additional data that bear directly on the theme of this work. Seen in this sometimes unsettling light, they provide a basis for the revelations that will come. But before we examine the archaeological evidence, let us look at the purely historical, the evidence that can be supported by unimpeachable primary sources. 1492. Lost Americans learned very early in their primary school education that America was discovered by Christopher Columbus on October 12, 1492. Some of them remember that he was supposed to be finding a more direct route to India by going west instead of east. Where does west end and east begin on a globe? How does that happen? How are we the West? The New World. How is that so? It amazes me the cognitive dissonance that is inside of people, and it's displayed in the things we say and the things we write. Like, I called myself an animal lover for years. Love animals. I'd do anything to help them. I just won't stop consuming them. Cognitive dissonance, right? Like a man or a woman of two minds in the same being. And that's the problem with living in the world. We're not supposed to be worldly. We're not supposed to listen to their schooling. We're not supposed not because it's hiding truth from us, but because it's confusing. It adds a confusion to your state of mind and your state of being. And we know the author of confusion is. Okay. And this is why we call Native American Indians, to this day, the result of Columbus's blunder in believing that the small Bahamian island he discovered was part of the Indian subcontinent. In the following weeks, he would similarly discover Cuba and Hispaniola, the island now comprising the Dominican Republic and Haiti. What is not well known is the reason for his expedition. Yes, he wanted to find a fast route to India and China. At that time, the great seafaring nations of Europe, in particular Portugal, but also Holland and other maritime powers, were going south along the African coastline, rounding South Africa at the Cape, and going north and east to reach India. Columbus, based on what are believed to be faulty geographic measurements and a faith in some of the apocryphal books of the Bible, thought he could make it to India much more quickly by going due east from the European coast. Yeah. The Portuguese had turned this idea down, realizing that his math was faulty, and the Spanish at first rejected him as well, but later had an audience with King Ferdinand of Spain, who agreed to fund his expedition and to grant him titles, land, and a tenth of whatever precious metals he found, an agent's commission. By going due west, again, from where? Where does west end and east begins? Do compasses even work? Like, how does that even, I mean, you can start going this way, right? You can turn around. Now you're going right instead of left. But on a globe, west and east don't work, man. It just doesn't. And people like cognitive dissonance. This is why when they teach you in school, they use repetition, they use homework so that you write things down, and they use reading so that you hear it and read it. And they repeat this crap over and over and over again. Oh, you've done so good. You've done so good. Oh, okay. What I've done is good. I hate what's been done to us here. I absolutely hate it. And I have every right to hate it. And so should you. I don't want to hear, oh, well, Jesus, that no. Jesus got angry in the temple. He was angry. He was angry that we wanted to exchange another being's life for our faults. He was angry that this was being done with money and being accommodated through that. And that it was all done under the guise of being part of a religion in God's temple. And again, I know these videos aren't the most popular. That's okay. One day, these things that I say to you will sink in, and not in a brainwashing type of way. You'll start asking questions. There are certain phrases people can say, there are certain things you can see that somehow they just activate something inside of you. And it opens up your mind more, or it opens up a part of your mind so that you have a bigger perspective and a fuller understanding of things. This is why I tell people, look at the word Jerusalem. USA is within Jerusalem. USA is inside of Jerusalem. Look at all of the cities that we renamed over here after the stuff over there. There's a reason for that. It's just wild. Okay. So this much is consistent with what school children know. However, Spain in 1492 was in the middle of one of the greatest upheavals in history. To understand what Columbus was doing and the hidden agenda of his voyage, and thereby to begin to understand American history from a European's perspective, we need to understand a little of what was happening in Spain. Spain, we have to understand the historic history of Islamic imperialism and its stormy relationship to Europe in general and Christianity in particular. I love how they blame Christians on being, having bloodlust or whatever and holy wars. And Islam still to this day goes around ending infidels, and we allow it. If your religion asks you to harm another, that is not of the Most High Creator Maker God. Unless it is, and it's judgment, right? Canaanites were eating people. They were eating people. They were eating children. They don't have the Holy Spirit. They want to end us simply for loving Jesus. And Jesus tells us to be kind. Jesus tells us to tell the truth. Right? Like, I don't get this. It should be obvious to people. Like, your religion is not of a creator maker God if it's consistently bloody. It's just not. Catholics, Christians, we're not out there doing that still. It's when there's a struggle for life, for truth, for innocence, for beauty. Because there's beauty in innocence and truth. While such a topic deserves much more space, we can summarize the situation as follows. Interested readers are urged to follow up with this on their own. Essentially, we must address the birth and expansion of Islam. Muhammad, the prophet who created the religion known as Islam, had a vision of the angel Gabriel while meditating in a cave in what is now Saudi Arabia. He was 40 years old, a tradesman, a pagan, and troubled by hearing Jewish and Christian tradesmen and others around them discussing their respective religions. Monotheism was a new concept, and the year was 610 AD. The vision of Gabriel ignited something in Muhammad's heart and soul. He began preaching a personal and unique amalgam, amalgam amalgamation, amalgam of Jewish, Christian, and native Arab mythology and religious and moral principles to anyone who would listen. These principles included better treatment of slaves and women, a life of moderation, a surrender to the one true God. The word Islam means surrender, and other spiritual doctrines. Abstinence from alcohol and the eating of pork were also included, the latter a probable borrowing from Jewish law, right? The people in his native Mecca found Muhammad to be something of a problem because his doctrines interfered with trade and with the status of the social elite. Much as Christianity had evolved from a messianic Jewish cult to a world religion and was about to conquer much of Europe as a political power, so too Muhammad and his followers were seen as a political and economic threat to the status quo. The political status quo in Jesus' time would have been the Romans, not the Pharisees in them. They were still, they were seeking, but they were blind. The Romans would be the equivalent there. Muhammad escaped a murder plot in Mecca and with some of his followers fled to Medina. We have all those places where I live here in Ohio. We have Medina. Mecca's right up the road, up north. So weird, man. All these strange connections. Muhammad found a slightly, and we have a Bethel not too far, and a Jerusalem within like an hour. This is wild. Muhammad found a slightly better reception in Medina, settled several tribal disputes, and gradually converted many of these tribes to his new religion. He tried to win the allegiance of the Jews in Medina, but the prophet was an illiterate Arab tradesman, and the Jewish elite scorned him and his new religion, which they found at odds with the Torah. Although Muhammad initially had his followers face Jerusalem when they prayed, and made them adopt the practice of the Yom Kippur fast, his experience with the Jews in Medina led him to change these practices. The Muslims now face Mecca, which is the site of an ancient Arab relic, the Kaaba, at the time of Muhammad, a pagan shrine containing 360 idols and a piece of black, probably meteoric rock. Oh, yes, their meteoric, that rock, their black rock, is the equivalent of the golden calf that the Israelites started worshiping. And we have a golden calf right outside of right outside of Wall Street. That's wild, man. All of these all these connections. And this is what he's going to talk about too. He's going to talk about how a lot of these connections are intentional. Not all the time though. And that events in history seem to point to other things that you should be used to avoid. We should not allow what's coming to come to fruition. We shouldn't. But again, it's just immigrants. Who cares, right? They're criminals. Oh, okay. Well, what about next? Who are they going to take next when they get sick of people not listening to them? Or people who criticize the president? God forbid. It's not a good way to be, man. You can't control or force anyone to love you. You can't control or force anyone to properly convert. That's not a true conversion. They're doing it under duress. We cannot give in to these things. But you also shouldn't push too hard against them. It's best in some cases to ignore them until you have to push against them. And then you do that spiritually through prayer, meditation, things to calm your own spirit so that when they try to bait you, you don't get emotional like I have been known to do. I apologize. It's hard with a head injury and being like things happen. And I'm always a victim. That's just not true. So, oh, there goes my tummy. All right, we'll read a little more about Muhammad here. But again, you have to have some of this background. As his religion grew in numbers, so Muhammad grew in political power. At the time of his death, Islam was virtually the state religion in Saudi Arabia. During the next 100 years after his death, Arab armies would give the idea of missionary work a new meaning as they conquered with fire and sword nation after nation, extending their faith in the Arab culture as far afield as France, where they were finally defeated by Charles Martel at the Battle of Tours in the year 800 AD. Yeah, where you're losing grip again, France. They had to fall back to Spain and Portugal in the west and in the east as far as Samarkand and Tashkent in Turkey. Europe would hear again of the Arab legions when the Ottoman Empire reached its heights in the 16th century, going as far inland as the outskirts of Vienna. I go to church in Vienna. Why do we rename everything the same? It's just strange. Running over the Balkans, Romania, and everything in between. It would be nearly another 300 years after the Battle of Tours before the First Crusades were mounted by the Catholic Church to take back the holy city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem was also sacred to the Muslims due to a tradition that Muhammad had ascended to heaven from a site in Jerusalem that was also sacred to Jews and Christians, the site of King Solomon's temple. Ugh. This scenario may be borrowing from the legend of Jesus and some stories of the Virgin Mother and of the prophet Elijah, who were all bodily carried, aka raptured, into heaven. And that's the word that they use. Muhammad's descendants, both familial and spiritual, then fought over the growing Islamic empire. Europe saw Islamic forces on their soil within a century after the death of Islam's founder, and in Spain it would be another 800 years before the last Islamic rulers would finally leave their country. Specifically in the year 1492, guys. It would be another 800 years before the last Islamic rulers would finally leave their country. That's what 1492 was about. They were dumping people off. They were doing what Trump's doing today, basically. He just wants to cleanse the place of people who disagree with him, or he labels dissidents, apparently. Again, I think the president should be a respected position, but they're public servants. You're here to serve the public. Like, what you're doing is not good. I remember, you hear stories about how kings would judge on their own if somebody had a quarrel in their village. Like, they would go stand before the king, and he would do this every day, or at least once a month or something, when he wasn't doing other kingly things. But like, they actually worked, they operated for their people back in the day, when you paid a landlord for the protection and the loyalty of the community, and you pulled your money and your resources. Like, that's just wise. So, what is this? Tales of the Alhambra. In the spring of 1829, the author of this work, whom curiosity had brought to Spain, made a rambling expedition from Seville to Granada in company with a friend, a member of the Russian embassy at Madrid. Accident had thrown us together from distant regions of the globe, and similarity of taste led us to wander together among the romantic mountains of Andalusia. That's Washington Irving, Tales of the Alhambra. In the spring of 2001, the author of this work, whom business had brought to Spain, made a fast expedition from Seville to Granada in company with a colleague, an executive of an American corporation that has a factory in Seville. Accident had thrown us together from distant regions of the globe. He from North Carolina, me from my temporary base in Malaysia. Interesting. And a similarity of taste and tightness of schedule led us to hire a car and drive across Spain in search of Granada and the fabled palace of the Alhambra. My Spanish is okay, my driving ability perhaps less. Okay. So we're talking about the Moors now. Cool. I wanted to fast forward a little and see what we were going to get into. As was the case with that earlier tour to Rome in company with another such executive, I found myself less of a chauffeur and more of a tour guide and an ad hoc historian as we wandered the fabulously decorated halls and courtyards of one of the most striking examples of Arab architecture anywhere. Hold, please. This is a guy who is an author, and he's well traveled. He's doing the actual footwork to do his research. And he runs into people by happenstance and ends up traveling with them a spell and showing them parts and pieces of America. You couldn't be more kind to a stranger. I just wanted to point that out. Like, academia and intelligence once went hand in hand. Education once had value. Once you get beyond the lies of history, like, and you could like learn about things that you could apply. Because even every society needs its artisans. You need beauty created, and sometimes beauty is created with words. We need authors. Everybody is essential, if you ask me. I am not a fan of culling plants. I can't do it. I mean, if I had a big garden, I probably would, because you get to the point where you have to at times, but it is always interesting for me to watch American executives abroad and to marvel at how little they really know of the world outside their borders. This case was no exception. The executive in question has a mother who is fascinated by church history and who has a passionate attachment to the Holy Land and especially to Jerusalem and the Holy Sepulchre, the site where Christ is supposed to have been laid to rest after the crucifixion. Yet her son, a tall, self-important man of heroic proportions with paranoid demeanor and somewhat lacking in social skills, seemed relatively unaware of Arab conquest in Europe, even though he had accompanied his mother on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and is the beneficiary of her knowledge of the subject. I found myself filling in odd gaps in his understanding of the stormy relationship that has existed between Muslims and Christians virtually since the death of Muhammad, and particularly since the Moorish invasions of Europe in the 8th century AD. Yeah, they weren't Moors, they are Muslims. It was a revelation to stand in the Alhambra in Spain and realize that there had been an Islamic government in charge of large parts of the country for 800 years. That is nearly as long as the time since Norman conquest of England in 1066, and is certainly much longer than the time elapsed since Columbus landing on San Salvador in 1492 and the present. The cities of Seville, Cordoba, and Granada are testimony to the once strong but now fading legacy of the caliphs of the Alhambra. Okay. Ghost stories. Washington Irving, the American author perhaps better known for his frightening legend of Sleepy Hollow and the somewhat comical and perceptive story of Rip Van Winkle, in his celebrated combination of short stories and travelogue, Tales of the Alhambra, makes justified recognition of the generally benign rule of the Moors in Spain, a reign that was famous for learning, science, and the arts, and which attracted scholars and artists from all over Europe in its time. Nonetheless, it was an alien transplant in Europe, and surrounded as it was by hostile Christians on every side, and separated by sea and land from its spiritual home in the Middle East, it eventually succumbed to pressure from without and within. The Moors were vanquished finally in the January of 1492, the same year that Columbus set sail on his first voyage to the New World, and that was not a mere coincidence. King Ferdinand was triumphant in removing the last vestige of Muslim political influence from Western Europe and began to dream of another conquest. This is what American school children never learn, and what scholars have been slow to report. From the Diario of Christopher Columbus, then. And Columbus says that he hopes, so this is an excerpt in this book from the Diary of Christopher Columbus. I'm getting a headache, so I'm going to have to go soon and tie it up. But I will show you some of the other chapters because, again, we're going to get into some good stuff. And I might just read from the book. It might be the computer screen. I might be getting bothered by that these days, so I might take a break from that and read from the book since I have it. Because, again, there's a lot of really cool parts in here. I was just flipping through, and I have stuff highlighted and everything. Okay, sorry. So this is an excerpt of Columbus's diary. And Columbus says that he hopes in God that on the return that he would undertake from Castile, he would find a barrel of gold that those who were left would have acquired by exchange, and that they would have found the gold mine and the spicery, and those things in such quantity that the sovereigns before 3 years will undertake and prepare to go conquer the Holy Sepulchre. For thus I urged your highness to spend all the profits of this enterprise on the conquest of Jerusalem. and your highness laughed and said that it would displease them, and that even without this prophet, they had that desire. The conquest of Jerusalem and the Holy Sepulchre, in other words, another crusade. The discovery of America and the subsequent voyages of Columbus had as their goal the recapture of Jerusalem. Indeed, one of the most important reasons for finding the fast route to the east was to provide Ferdinand with a different strategy for retaking Jerusalem. For if Columbus was right, and if India and China could be reached by traveling due east, then so could Jerusalem. Rather than send an army of crusaders across the Mediterranean or via land through hostile Muslim territory, Ferdinand believed he could instead attack Jerusalem from the eastern side. No one would expect a crusader force coming from the land east of Jerusalem when all previous attacks had come from the west. Ironically, then, American history begins in the sands of Palestine, and the solemn stones of Jerusalem and King Solomon's temple, the Holy Sepulchre, and the Dome of the Rock. You see, when they're talking about the dome, that's what they're referring to. They're talking about another holy war. Again, you don't have to believe me. I'm using this book to explain my own, what I'm seeing happening. Okay? It's happening again because they're never done. It's never enough. They can never consume enough. They can never fight enough. They can never kill, destroy, or steal enough. And we have to kick the snake out of the garden. We have to put our foot down and say, no, more of this. We have to recognize we have a common enemy, and that is deception. That is wickedness, and by that, inversion, right? People that harm children, people that harm animals and the less vulnerable, people that don't have any skills but want to point at everybody else about how they're so wicked or they can't do anything. You don't have any real skills. What do you manage? What do you offer? What do you bring to the table in the community? Can you plant things? Can you grow things for people to eat? Can you fish and actually catch things and feed people? We need to understand that we don't need to be governed. If you have a good heart and you are a child of God and you understand natural law that's right in front of you every day, you don't need governed. You have the Lord. Again, these jobs are for lazy people. They have actor proxies on the screen. None of that is real. And what they're saying and talking about is in code for each other. And if we happen to decode it, well, too late anyway. Whatever it is has already been done. It has to stop. It has to stop. Okay. Ironically, then, American history begins in the sands of Palestine and the solemn stones of Jerusalem and King Solomon's temple, the Holy Sepulchre, and the Dome of the Rock, where so many have fought and suffered and died for religion, and still do. And everyone thinks they're working or operating for God. Christ didn't do any harm. What did he do in the temple? He turned over a table and yelled at people, and they wanted to kill him for that. We got to stop allowing wickedness to rule and to set the rule in the law. Much has been made in conspiracy literature of the possible connections Columbus had with the outlawed Knights Templar. It is said that his fleet, the famous Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, bore the Red Templar cross on their sails as a sign of the real mission of the Genoese-born Columbus and his Spanish patrons. Although the Templars had been suppressed 200 years previously, there is evidence to show that some members of the order had escaped to Portugal and Scotland, among other places. We can easily see how their descendants would have privately rejoiced in such a grail-like quest. Jacques de Molay, thou art avenged. We should also remember it was Columbus's patrons, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, who created the Spanish Inquisition in 1478. At first, it was designed to root out heresy among the Marranos, the Jews who had converted to Christianity, usually through social or other pressure. Really? It was then extended to those who had converted from Islam. At its height, the Grand Inquisitor was also responsible for the American territories conquered by Spain, Mexico, and Peru, the lands of the Aztecs and the Incas, respectively. In the case of America, however, the Inquisition was concerned less with heresy and more with witchcraft and sorcery. In addition, and most importantly, we should realize that the Spanish Inquisition was not run by the church. Authority was given by the Pope to the king to run the Inquisition, thereby making it a governmental organization, even though the inquisitors themselves were usually Catholic churchmen, predominantly Dominican monks. This mechanism could be followed 200 years later in Salem, Massachusetts, during America's own witch trials, when religious authority gave way to secular and witches. Practitioners of spellcasting, Satan worshipping, and other such acts considered anti-Christian were arrested, indicted, tried, and executed by the secular courts. Heresy is tantamount to rebellion where there is a state church, and therefore it became the state's business to discover and punish and torture and execute heretics. They were, after all, de facto traitors. Private beliefs became matters for public prosecutions. And that, my friends, is the problem. We should not be prosecuting or persecuting someone for their belief system, unless that belief system entails the harming of innocence, the harming of anyone else. It's not our business what someone does inside their home or how someone raises their child unless we know it's doing harm to them. And right now, everybody's doing harm because there's negligence has run abound and apathy. And that's such a bad combination. You have people that don't care, and they don't care that they don't care. Like they don't realize it's not a good state to operate in. They don't even see it. These people, if an emergency does happen, cannot be trusted. I can't tell you this enough. They cannot be trusted. I don't care who they are, whose face they wear, whose name they use, who they are to you. Okay? God tells us, do not be deceived. And finally, we should not forget that the Pilgrims, the Puritans, and the Huguenots, some of the first settlers in North America, were religious refugees fleeing oppression in their native lands to practice their faiths freely. It is no indulgence or hyperbole to suggest that the modern origins of America are spiritual or at least religious in nature, and that America has spent the last 500 years trying, usually unsuccessfully, to ignore that fact. Amen. In light of the events on September 11th, 2001, in the United States, many Americans have a dim view of Islam and suspect all Muslims of harboring ill intentions toward their country. In spite of all the rhetoric denying this, there is some truth to the suspicion that devout Muslims are hostile to the West. Islamic rulers have had a long and well documented history of anti European aggression, beginning with the invasions in the 8th century AD, long before the First Crusade against Jerusalem. Particularly since the end of World War I, when the 500-year Ottoman Empire was finally destroyed by Western forces, and when the betrayal of the Arab Revolt was etched in stone at the peace talks in Versailles, thus paving the way for the creation of it. And that's where I'm from, North Versailles. North Versailles, they call it in PA, but whatever. Thus paving the way for the creation of a Jewish state in the midst of Arab Palestine. Muslims have been angry at the West and at what they perceive to be Western decadence and immorality. Well, I can't disagree. An attempt, perhaps, to raise a visceral sense of humiliation at the hands of the technologically advanced nations to a higher spiritual plane. Although in the past Christians and Jews fared better, oddly, under Muslim leaders than under Christian administrators. It would be naive to believe, and again, that's the thing. Just because somebody says there's something doesn't mean they are. J.D. Vance says that he's Catholic. Catholics do not participate in weddings that are Hindu, let alone get married during that. Real Catholics, you're not allowed to do that. You'd be excommunicated. You're not allowed. It's not done because you're Catholic. Why are you getting married in a Hindu ceremony? I'm not saying anything against it. I'm just saying it's a lie. You cannot trust somebody who lies about who they are. You just can't. They're dangerous. Oh, yeah. Okay, so it would be naive to believe. Oh, so the Christian leaders who they say they're Christian, that doesn't mean they're Christian. They could want to lead just so they can persecute. Just like people who harm children sometimes get jobs near children just to be able to have access to children, or they get in relationships with women who have children just to be close to the children. Like, I don't, and it's not every case. I'm not saying that either. So don't even turn this into some blanket statement that I did not make. Uh, it would be naive to believe that most Muslims are friendly to the West in general, to the US in particular, has especially in light of America's role in support of Israel. Islamic fundamentalism has been on the rise worldwide, and the only thing stopping the creation of a new Ottoman Empire is chronic disunity among Muslim nations. But it was not always thus. Okay, I'm going to stop here for now. And what I'm going to do is go over here. Hello. Hello. That's not what I wanted to do. This. Thank you for your patience if anyone is here. This. Yeah. We're going to go to section 2, Agents of the Devil. I'll give you a little preview. Oh my gosh. The devil appears in many guises in culture and art. In the above drawing by 17th century illustrator Bartolomeo Pinelli, Satan commands his demons and evil beings. Okay. He's got all kinds there. Oh, there's a little guy with a mask up there. You've got serpents, people with serpent hair, people with horns. Oh, all right. And then in the below drawing by Gustave Dore, there is the contemplative fallen angel, Lucifer, from Dante's Divine Comedy. Section 2, Agents of the Devil. I told you, if you hung out this long or if you fast forwarded and you came to this spot, thank you so much. I'm going to do a time check because I want to do a timestamp for this part. Don't ask. It's just something I want to do. Timestamp. Okay. So this is interesting to me about, again, why I always felt that pull away from politics and away from the voting system, and I did not want to get involved in that argument, right? There is one argument here, and it is evil against good. That's it. The rest of these things are just, again, window dressings. They're like dress rehearsals. You've got football games, you've got baseball games, you've got politics, you've got the red, you've got the blue, you've got nationalism, you've got the US versus whoever that day. Like, it's just, it gets to be a lot. And really, the only battle we should be concerned with is fighting evil, resisting evil. Don't allow it in your community. Don't allow certain things to happen. I have to say, I'm glad for the things that happened to me. I'm glad I'm not still asleep. I would have gone on hurting myself and hurting others had I not been humiliated and just shamed. Shamed. I was shamed. But unfortunately I needed that to wake up to my condition. And it really is like I was reborn, because I feel more like a child these days than I do an adult. And I mean that in an innocent type of way. I enjoy simple things like I used to as a child. It doesn't take much to make me smile or have enjoy myself, considering the situation too. So figure that one out. If you have Jesus, you have Jesus. Section 2, Agents of the Devil. Now here it is. Here's what I said about World War II, the Stasi, the community surveillance, and all the blue-eyed people and blonde-haired. And I'm not saying that you're bad. I'm saying that the people who geoengineered are bad. Okay? But the blue-eyed people with the blonde hair all over the place are proof of what I say. And here, I'm not the only one. To sustain, and this is from this is from the Nuremberg trial. To sustain the master race in its war making, they enslaved millions of human beings and brought them into Germany, where these hapless creatures now wander as displaced persons. At length, bestiality and bad faith reached such excess that they aroused the sleeping strength of imperiled civilization. Its united efforts have ground the German war machine to fragments, but the struggle has left Europe a liberated yet prostrate land where a demoralized society struggles to survive. These are the fruits of the sinister forces that sit with these defendants in the prisoner's dock. What makes this inquest significant is that these prisoners represent sinister influences that will lurk in the world long after their bodies have returned to dust. This is Peter Jackson's opening statement at the Nuremberg trial. Do you know which way technology is headed? It is headed for the metaphysical. Radio waves are no longer anything concrete. Wireless is already a highly abstract technique. The transmission of pictures infringes on the realm of religion. The extermination weapons are a point of contact with the universe. The physical world has its boundaries. Only the psychic is oceanic. And the author of Civilization and its as the author of Civilization and its Discontents puts it, that is why mankind's next bold step must be the materialization of the psychic. General von Grehan, General Reinhard Gehan in Agent of the Devil by Hans Hobb. Yikes. That's madness. Like some of that is madness. I find that fascinating. That this symbol we're told is wicked now, but it meant good luck back in the day. So if they say he is wicked, should we believe him? Should we believe them? I shared a video of how much people lie. That's weird. That looks like my cousin's or my husband's nephew. Adolf Hitler and someone's Mengele, Joseph Mengele. That's who that one chick talked about, and he is wicked. I think he's that guy. I think. I don't really want to know. I don't care. And this is chapter 4, Unholy Alliance, Nazism, Satanism, and Psychological Warfare in the USA. Directed or influenced by personalities which are marked by a criminal, a perverted, a criminal pathological, or in any case, an exceedingly vulgar imagination. But the worst perversion of the secret services, and how could there be a worse one, is that of human sacrifice. Agent of the Devil, Hans Hobb. I'm going to have to read that book now. Is anyone even here? Happy 4th of July, folks. I'm not really big into fireworks. They represent like sounds of war to me, so it's never been a thing for me. Sometimes people are into war and they're religious. I've never seen the point. I think it's barbaric. I'll read just a clip of this beginning. That way when I start the next one, I think because I'm going to read this chapter regardless. On New Year's Day, 1969, the petite body of Marina Elizabeth Hobb. Oh, okay, so Hans Hobb is the one that wrote that. Was found naked at the bottom of a ravine in Mulholland Drive in Los Angeles, about 4 miles from home. Is this the Dahlia murder? The 17-year-old student at the University of Hawaii, an aspiring actress, was the victim of multiple stab wounds in the neck and chest and had been raped. I hate to say that, but that word I am going to censor because, anyway, burned and had contusions in her eyes. Why do they want to mess with everybody's eyes so badly? Why? Is it the whole see no evil thing? Tough duty, man. Like seriously. The blinding of people and all of it. It's just ridiculous. It was a savage attack reminiscent of the later attack on Darwin Scott in Ashland, Kentucky. She had been returning from a date with friend John Hornberg in Brentwood in the early morning of September 30th, 1968, and was kidnapped from in front of the home she shared with her mother in the Hollywood Hills after returning from a night out on Santa Monica Boulevard. The case remains unsolved, but there was a lot of speculation at the time that her killer was a Manson family member. Family is their organization. It doesn't mean... And family, you have the mob calls their thing the family too. So can anyone come up with anything original anymore? For real though. family members, since she was known to have befriended various members of the group. Manson himself had no alibi for the day and time of her passing and is known to have been in LA on the day she was kidnapped and ended, attending a New Year's Eve party at the home of musician John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas. When are we going to understand that these people are no good? And I'm talking to myself, too. I have to start looking into now every artist that I still listen to. Did they have someone immediately die as soon as they become famous? Because that is not coincidence. I get told these same things that I need to ignore this, that, and the other. I was almost ended. I know what a sacrifice looks like and sounds like. Like, I get it now. You don't have to have a bunch of people in robes, though sometimes I guess they do that for effect, and depending on the day and the time of the moon cycle. This is where we are. It is not good. There's nothing cool about it. You might get a few trinkets, but what even the Christian channels don't tell you, ladies, it makes you really, really ugly in your older years, physically. You get very nasty looking in your older years, and you go literally insane, and you're all alone, and we see it. There are many women in the industry who would appear to be losing their minds. The one girl who just went to Bali, Aruga, the Uruga, Beyonce is into that too. I guess if you don't bow down to Beyonce and her false religion in Hollywood, that's it. What even is that, Uruga? I don't know what that is. And if we are going to have a holy war, the Muslims, like the entertainers, are the first people they'll go after, which is probably why most of them have left the building. They're no longer here. I don't care what no one says. And the Diddy trial, have we seen him at all? Well, you can't see him. Why? Why not? There's no clips of him going to and from the courtroom like there used to be back in the day. Like, is he even in there? Or is this all bread and circus? Because I've seen R. Kelly since 2019. I've seen him brought out twice now and do the trial thing. And it was the same trial both times. It wasn't like he was being retrialed for different crimes by different. It was the same thing. Nobody else noticed, but I don't have a life, so I noticed. We're going to read this chapter next. Thank you if you hung out in there for this. It is important when you're doing research that the first thing you do is get a background. And that's what he's doing here, is building a background and giving you a little idea and getting the pieces in place so you can start to understand how America was born. And America was allegedly born out of religious persecution. People came here for religious freedom. But what religion is that? Because anyone that is ending the most vulnerable in its society does not deserve to continue on as a society, which I think we're seeing. We are under judgment. I don't think we have a government anymore, at least not the same one. Are they ever going to tell us little people? I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work, but I know that everything is different now. If you hung out here this long, thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you being here. I will do shorter videos. I do like doing shorter videos. But for some of the live streams, again, it's important that we build back up our attention spans. It's important that we know how to actively listen to one another again. So those are skills, they're muscles that we need to use, just like you should be using your brain every day to learn new things so that it doesn't go stagnant or stale. We need you. You're a part of a community of sentient beings. Every sentient being is essential. But when you start doing harm, you're not harming just that person, you're harming yourself. And then you're causing a cycle in that person to maybe harm the people around them. Australia doesn't seem like a bad idea to me in how they started that nation. They didn't end nobody. They just said, here, if you're going to do this, go do it on this island. Everybody should be taken back to Haiti. If you want to do that worship stuff, that juju stuff, go do it there. Because since you came here and you started all that, do you like causing mess for your neighbors? Nobody's going to want you around now that they know what you're messing and dabbling in. Nobody's going to buy your music. We're done with all that. And again, the butterfly effect is real. One person starts doing it or stops doing it, it's a domino effect. And it can't be stopped. There's nothing wickedness can do about that. Which is why I keep getting up, why I have my joy, why I can do all things through Christ, and so can you. I love you. God bless you. You have a great day. And that is what we will do next in this series. But I may take a break from that if something else comes up. I'm not going to dive right back into this. But for this day and for this time, it's important you know the roots of where all of this has come from. The news that you see is nothing but scripted psyops to keep you in a place of control. They don't want you curious. They don't want you asking questions. And if you're going to be in any mood, they prefer that it's either a mood where you're hungry and you need to feed a desire, whether that's food, shopping, whatever. They got you in this realm if that's what you want to spend your time on. Or someone like me, they want in fear so that I don't move the way God intended me to move in this life. But it's going to happen. People are going to fulfill their destinies. It can't be stopped. I hate when people say, if you don't do what God told you to do when He told you to do it, He'll pull your anointing away. Whatever is set to happen with your free will, whatever your purpose is, you are going to fill that purpose. God don't make junk. Even if we say no about things in a roundabout type of way, our purpose will be fulfilled. And that is to the good of ourselves and those around us. We got to start remembering that our actions don't affect just us. It affects the whole next generation of people. It's time to be accountable and say, I messed up. I set a very poor example. I apologize. I acknowledge it. And now I'm trying to set it right by offering you my time every day in some way to talk about something I've learned through this process so that maybe you can avoid being publicly shamed, shunned, and almost called to be brought back to awareness. That's how much it took for me. I pray it doesn't take that much for any other person. I love you all. Have a blessed day. Be aware, be observant, stay hydrated. I would be avoiding crowds. I would not be doing any of this. And that's what they want. Again, they don't want us talking. They don't want us fellowshipping. And that's not what I would avoid their venues, right? Avoid their principality, their territory on certain days. Just stay out of it. And again, all territory is your territory when you walk with God, just like Enoch. Y'all have a blessed day. Stay safe. I will say it today because of the day that it is. Be wise. Don't mess around with fire and none of that weird stuff. And again, I will read the next chapter if you guys learned anything from this, or if you caught it, you understand what's here and you want to hear more. And I'll try to also, I did post a source link up there so you can read it ahead if you want. And I'm also going to put like a little summary in the description box just so people that happen upon it know what it's about. All right. Have a blessed day. I'm going to go hang out with my friends, my dogs. Yeah. If you want to call me pathetic, that's fine. But a victim, I am not. Somebody was right about that. I'm not a victim. Not anymore. Bye, guys.